So, dear Scilla, welcome to Peace One Day, and thank you for being interviewed to celebrate this day.
Jeremy, thanks for all you do to make this day work so well.
So, the first question I'd like to ask you, Scilla, you've been nominated a number of times for the Nobel Peace Prize. Could you tell us about your peace work?
Well, what I'm concentrating on most at the moment is working with Ukrainian and Russian women to build their capacity to negotiate a ceasefire and ultimately be part of the negotiations to end the Ukraine war. And this is very demanding work for them for all sorts of obvious reasons. But that's against the background of what our organization, Business Plan for Peace, is doing both in local organizations in the UK and in other countries as well. So we're devoting ourselves to ways in which, particularly ways in which we find that the female influence and the way women help to stop wars is becoming really significant now, because we can spell out how it fills a gap that is left in normal negotiations. I can come back to that later if you like.
Thank you. So it's been 25 years of Peace One Day, and we're marking that sort of 25-year moment now. Could you talk to me about the importance of a day of peace and why you've supported for so long?
Oh, I think it's been significant to mark a particular day, and this is 21st of September is great, when all those who are normally silenced or can't get video time, can't get airtime, can really talk about what matters to them. Because peace is a very floppy subject for a lot of people. We hear masses in our newscasts every day on the progress of wars. We hear almost nothing about what thousands and thousands of people worldwide are doing to stop war. So that's why I think this day is so important, that you allow vignettes, you allow pictures, you enable people to come and speak about what they do. And that's vitally important that people know that.
Yes, so Scilla, I agree. I mean, it was interesting to see that the Institute for Economics and Peace, the Global Peace Index, Steve Killalea out of Australia, was seeing a kind of 15% reduction of violent deaths on the day compared to other days. So you're absolutely right, aren't you? You know, we see this day of peace. We see it now, probably 3 billion people fully aware. And we're seeing large-scale behavioural change that when compared to other days, we're seeing a 15% reduction of violent deaths. So I suppose that's exactly the point that you're making, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's, I didn't realise that Steve had measured that. He's brilliant at bringing these statistics to life. And it's really important that people know this, that having a day when people might just down their weapons and pay attention to what is the alternative rather than fighting. I think that's a huge thing to have achieved.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I found it absolutely incredible, when I saw that come through. I mean, I guess we knew ultimately that we were going to see large scale behavioural change in our homes, schools, communities and places of work. But, it was obviously an incredible statistic, as you say, to read that the impacts of, large participation, around the issue of peace, therefore, is reducing violence, which of course makes complete sense. But to see it really be brought to life and measured is just an incredible thing. I mean, it's like Mother's Day, isn't it, Scilla? We know that on Mother's Day, everybody is being incredibly lovely to their mums. That's behavioural change on a massive scale. And the amount of arguments that probably decrease as a consequence of that, I would imagine, is huge. And there lies exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I know that children and students in schools have been encouraged to take time on the 21st of September to think about their grievances and their arguments and find ways to put them to rest. I think it's educational and it's very significant. And I believe that year on year, this figure that you've got is going to increase.
Yeah, I agree with you. That brings us nicely on to, how to really make peace happen. And I wanted to ask, why do you think women leaders stop war?
Oh, I don't just think it, I know it. I can give you all the detail, but I think it's really extraordinary how when we're all faced with seeing wars on the television, we sort of sit there aghast with our mouths open, and this endless repetition of terrifying violence. But there are people all over the world, and I can give you lots of examples as we go on, who apply themselves not just to peace being a nice thing, but to actually stopping the cycle of violence. If you look at the diagram we've got of how wars start, they usually start with an atrocity, then that results in shock, in fear, in grief, and then in anger. And unless something is done, the anger turns to bitterness, to revenge, retaliation, and then you get another atrocity starting. So what women have woken up to is that they have a role, quite a growing important role, in actually halting this cycle of violence. And how do they do it? They're usually not the instigators of a violent cycle. So they start from a different place, bringing less charged emotional baggage with them. They can be freer to empathize with others whom men may see only as enemies. Women tend to use their intuition, and that helps them to enable different sides to understand what's needed in the moment. They come up with ideas and possibilities, things that Jonathan Powell, the man who negotiated so well for us on Northern Ireland, he says those possibilities enlarge the pie which men in power might not dream of. And once you have a balance of women in negotiating teams, that's been shown to help reach a peace deal that will last longer. Because many peace deals are made and then broken. But there was a study done by the UN of 182 signed peace agreements between 1989 and 2011, and it revealed that peace agreements where women were involved are 35% more likely to last 15 years. And we need a lot more statistics like that. They're coming out every day now. And the other thing I'd mention is secret back channels. Those are crucial in resolving many armed conflicts, and they can most effectively be carried out by women. The ability to speak truth to power, for example, without provoking hostility and violence, it's an invaluable skill, and many, many women possess it. I'm thinking really of the examples we've had over the last 10 years. You may remember in Liberia, after a 14 years civil war, a woman called Lema Gabawi got Christian and Muslim women in an interfaith movement. It was called the Women of Liberia Mass Action for Peace. And what they did, it was very exciting. They got really fed up with negotiations going nowhere, and they went down to Abidjan and surrounded the building in which Charles Taylor on one side and the other revolutionaries on the other side were supposed to be negotiating a peace agreement. They'd been there for 6 months, and they didn't really want to stop because they were having a good time. There's plenty of food, amusement, and so on. And so what the women did is they got hold of the guards, they got them to surround the building and close the windows and the doors. The guards agreed with them that this had to end now. And the women sat with their backs to the doors and windows outside, and they wouldn't let the men out until they reached agreement. It only took 24 hours. When the men were hammering on the doors and windows trying to get out, but when they realized they couldn't, they realized they had to get down to it and make an agreement, which is what happened. So there's loads of stories like that. You know, we remember in Northern Ireland how Betty Williams and Myron McGuire co-founded the Community of Peace People. And that meant that over 10,000 Catholic and Protestant women were brave enough, risking their lives then, to march for peace. And they did that from 1974, 6 years, till 1980, and they risked their lives doing it. And they received the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts to do this. And I could go on, but it's now happening all over the world that we're seeing. I think it's as women become more visible, more literate, more able to intervene and understand what's going on and show their objection to violence, because they're the ones who pick up the pieces. They're the ones who bury the dead. They're the ones who try to bring up children with no fathers. They're the ones who bear the brunt of famine and deprivation and no water and starvation. So they're the ones who are very highly motivated from the bottom up to do something about creating peace.
Scilla, amazing stories. Thank you so much. Inspirational on the Day of Peace to hear you talk about remarkable women making peace possible. So thank you for that. So to the individuals, we've just been informed and inspired, and now, you know, we want to get engaged as a consequence of listening to you. So to the individuals around the world, how important are our own individual actions in relation to trying to change the current trajectory of how we're treating each other and our planet?
Well, I feel that we have a lot to learn about the intelligence of the heart. And that's why when the pandemic started, I just got this feeling that I had to write, and I wrote for 2 weeks. And out of that came a 10-part program called The Mighty Heart, because I realized we had a lot to learn to enlarge our capacity to listen. Because when I observed for 20 years nuclear weapons policymakers from the then 5 nuclear weapons nations. I managed to get them together, the delegations, including the military and the people who design the nuclear weapons, and people who led the practices and the planning for war. And what I discovered with these meetings was that when you sit men around a table, they don't tend to listen to one another. They make a speech or make a declaration and then pass it on to the next man. What we find with women particularly is when they learn to listen and listen with the heart, and if necessary, repeat back to their opposite number or the person they're arguing with what they've heard them say, then you get a completely different communication going on. And so when women play a larger part in these peace negotiations, that's what they bring to the table. They insist on listening properly to one another. That's just one of the skills of this Mighty Heart program. So that's been available in 6 cities in the UK now for some time. And we're actually now working with it with women in Ukraine and their sisters in Russia. It's very exciting what's happening there. I can tell you a little bit about it, but not a lot.
And Scilla, I'm intrigued. Is there a place where we can find information about that work in Ukraine and Russia? Is it in the public domain, or is that very much something that's all being negotiated at the moment?
It's just about to be, but we have to it's very dangerous work for obvious reasons for people on both sides, but particularly for Russian women. But we find that as the word gets around, we're being approached by more and more very, very well qualified, very able, very articulate women on both sides who want to meet and talk about how to make a prelude for negotiations. Negotiations aren't even on the cards at the moment, but they say that until some basics have been established, the negotiations can't really get a footing. So that's where it's going, but I'll keep you posted, Jeremy, as we go along. I have enormous admiration for these individual women who've, and they keep, more of them keep turning up to our Zoom calls. And it's very, very exciting with it. There's this sort of, against all the bad news that there is everywhere, from just insufferable conflicts like Gaza. It's so vivifying. It's so encouraging to see the courage of women in war zones who are willing to take a stand for peace.
Well, Scilla, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to talk to you on Peace Day. You've been an absolute total inspiration to me on my journey and an enormous supporter of Peace One Day. And we wouldn't be where we are today if you hadn't been there as one of the real pillars of the work that's taken place. So I'm just incredibly grateful to you. I love that I know you, and thank you for everything that you do.
Jeremy, that's nonsense. When I see the work that you've done and when I see it lined up and recorded, I just, my mouth's open. You just bring all the right people in from cinema, from screen, from recordings, from singing. And it's wonderful the way you corral all these brilliant minds and voices to talk about peace on Peace Day. Thank you.
Scilla, thanks a lot. Good luck with all of your incredible work.
Thank you, Jeremy.